Want a podcast? Kia ora, I'm Maxine, podcast producer, audio nerd, and founder of Maxine London Creative. Let's explore what it takes to start and maintain a successful podcast. I'll chat with industry experts, podcast hosts, and fellow audio nerds on everything about the wonderful world of podcasting. We'll talk techniques, trends, and top tips to get you started on your podcast journey. Whether you're a podcast newbie or you've been here a while, welcome. Want a podcast? Now, if you listened a couple of weeks ago, you'll know that I did an episode all about how to enter the New Zealand Podcast Awards. I talked about what to include in your submission, how to present your clips, and all that strategy stuff that you need to know to hopefully win an award. Now, the submissions for the Podcast Awards are well and truly closed, and since I released that episode, I was actually invited to be a judge on the Podcast Awards. The judging process is completed now, and I thought that I would take this opportunity to talk about some of the generic things that I noticed while judging some of the episodes. It was such a fascinating opportunity to see all of the podcasts, a huge variety that came through. Some of them were absolutely awesome. So the winners are going to be announced any day now, I think, and I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to share with you some of the observations that I made, what made some entries stand out, where others maybe slipped up a little bit, so that you can start thinking ahead for next year's awards submission. And if you'd prefer to listen to this next year when you're going to be making your submission and making your show reel, of course, you can save this episode and come back to it later because it will all still be relevant. But I do think that it is helpful to start thinking about this stuff now so that you can start implementing some of these tips in your episodes and maybe even do a little bit of prep as you go throughout the year. And just a quick note before we dive in, the judging criteria itself is confidential, so I'm not going to be sharing any of the exact scoring breakdown or anything relevant to any of the podcasts that I actually marked. But what I can tell you is that there are 5 main things that you need to look out for that I was assessing for each category. They covered a mix of quality, engagement, creativity, and overall impact. All right, let's get into it. The first and most important tip I could ever stress is to follow the rules. Seriously. Because not following the rules is a really quick way to lose points. If the brief says to include 1 second of silence at the start or end of your clips or your submission, do it. If it asks you for a particular file length or naming convention or format, do it. You'll be surprised at how many people overlook these little details. And look, it's not like the judges are all sitting there nitpicking through file names for fun. But if you can follow these simple instructions, it just does leave an impression about your professionalism and your attention to detail. Plus, when we are judging multiple podcasts, if your file name is easy to follow, it's easy to know what one your podcast is. If we have to be wondering what one it is and thinking, oh, where did that link come from? It's all taking our precious time, which can then impact how we feel about your podcast. I mean, I personally didn't mark anyone down for not naming their file correctly, but it does take a bit of time away, and that is important to consider. So let's treat the technical bits as part of the presentation because they absolutely are, okay? The second thing I noticed was editing smoothly, okay? Don't do any jarring cuts. I know that you're selecting clips and snippets from various episodes, but you still need to make sure that you are cutting each one in a natural pause place. There were some entries where the clips were just cut together beautifully. It felt really seamless and natural, and it really showcased their storytelling abilities, but also their craft and editing abilities. And then others were a little bit rough with their cuts in their presentation, and it did really impact the quality. Remember that with the show reel, you're really wanting to put your best foot forward, and that means not only the episodes, but the show reel itself. So editing in the show reel is important. Make sure that you give the listener a little bit of breathing room. Jarring transitions can instantly pull you out of a story, and that affects your overall impression and engagement score. Think of it like you're editing a film trailer. The flow matters just as much as the content. Now let's talk about music, okay? Don't overdo it. A little bit of music at the start and the end can be a really nice touch, and it can really add to your show personality. But 45 seconds of just music, that cuts into your time. You've only got 15 minutes to show me your best stuff. Too much music can really eat into your valuable time and distract from the actual content. And while we're on that, if you're including multiple clips, you don't need to explain each one with the audio because you can do that with your written submission. So use your audio time to show what really makes your podcast great. Showcase your best moments from your podcast, a variety of emotions, not just telling the judges what they're about to hear, because we know, we can see it in your written. The next thing, which is a really important point, and I think this is really important for your podcast in general, not just if you're submitting for an award, but for anything that you want to do with your podcast, is knowing your audience and knowing your purpose. This is honestly one of the biggest differentiators between high and low scoring podcasts. The shows that performed the best were really, really clear on who they were talking to and why. They knew the audience, their purpose, and what they wanted their listener to feel or take away. Those podcasts had focused. They made an impact because every choice, from tone to structure to sound design, was made with their listener in mind. The ones that struggled, you really could tell that they hadn't quite figured out their why or their who. Their lack of clarity comes through in the storytelling, the editing, and even the energy. So if you're thinking ahead to next year's awards, spend some time now clarifying who am I talking to, why should they care, and what do I want them to feel when they listen. And here's a little bonus tip for you. This is what I do with some of my clients who regularly enter the podcast awards. Track your best episodes now. It will make it so much easier on your future self because when the award time comes around and you have to think, oh no, I have a whole year worth of content to think back on. What were the best 5? It's really tricky. So when you release an episode that you're really proud of or you get great feedback on, make a note of it. For my clients, if I think that an episode is an awards contender, I literally tag that in the email so that I can just search my inbox come awards time. That way, when the award season rolls round, you're not digging through 12 months worth of content trying to remember which one had that magic moment. If you've already got a shortlist ready to go, it's going to make your life so much easier. Judging the podcast awards was honestly such a great experience. I was so thrilled to be invited as a judge, and I hope I get to do it again next year. It really gave me a whole new appreciation for the level of talent in our podcasting community. Aotearoa is full of such amazing, creative individuals who really take storytelling to that next level. But it also reminded me that excellence isn't about fancy production or huge budgets. It's about clarity, craft, and care. The podcasts that really stood out weren't necessarily the biggest or the flashiest. They were the ones that really understood their audiences. They respected their listeners' time and they told great stories. So if you're thinking about entering next year and you want to start sharpening up some of those storytelling or strategy skills now, keep refining your craft, and when the time comes around, you'll be ready to put your best work forward. You can always join me for a podcast strategy session if you are interested in entering next year. It's 1 hour of my time where you get to pick my brain about anything. We can come up with an amazing strategy so that when the award season comes around next year, you are ready to go. Thank you so much for listening, and if you found this helpful, make sure you share it with a fellow podcaster. Let's celebrate the amazing talent we have in Aotearoa. Until next time, keep creating, keep experimenting, and keep sharing your voice with the world. Bye. Thanks for listening to Want a Podcast. If you got something out of this episode, give it some love. Subscribe, follow, share it with your friends, or leave a review. It all helps to get this podcast into the ears of those who need it. If you're keen to connect, check out Want a Podcast or Maxine London Creative on Instagram, or head to maxineLondonCreative.co.nz. Check out the show notes for links. Thanks again for being part of my community. See you next time.